In March of 2020, because of the COVID pandemic, quarantines were imposed, and in the United States, hundreds of millions of people had to go home. Tens of millions of people lost their jobs, as a handful of people in comparison technically got trillions of dollars with the CARES Act that was passed by 100% of the US Congress. Tens of millions of people are still out of work in September. It's immoral, at the least, to take away and not give back. The correct moral thing for our leaders to do is to help these folks, and basically everyone affected economically by this crisis. How can we really start? It has to be ongoing, longer than a very brief period of unemployment insurance and a one-time $1,200 stimulus check. On Saturday, September 19th, 2020, join the worldwide 2020 Basic Income March for Universal Basic Income. In Los Angeles, it begins at 2 p.m. Pacific Time in Pershing Square, downtown Los Angeles, next to the Pershing Square Metro train station. For more information, check out actionnetwork.org. Find an event that's close to you. Since 2015, we covered the subject of universal basic income on the Nowman Show on several occasions. Unconditional guaranteed income for everyone.
Oh, not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. That's not, I've heard people talk about that, like the philosophers like Alan Watts.
Yeah.
He said something interesting. He said, money isn't wealth, it just measures wealth. Right? So when the stock market crashes, we still have the same wealth in America. There's just an accounting problem. He said that's like showing, if you show up at the bank and they go, we're out of money, we'll print more. He goes, it's just like showing up at a construction site and saying, hey, we were out of inches. What? What do you mean you're out of? They just measure what you're doing. Yeah, exactly. They're not what you're doing.
Matt here is a videographer. Next is a video again from Matt, which is called Big Idea. And what is that big idea? Well, find out right now.
If we are to bring America to the point that we have one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, there are certain things that we must do.
Today, I'd like to share a big idea with you. The idea of some of history's greatest thinkers.
A guaranteed minimum income for all people and for all families of our country.
Free money for everyone.
True individual freedom cannot exist without economic security.
An income fully adequate to a decent life.
Basic income guarantee.
Give everybody X amount of dollars a year to live. And I was like, get out of here. But then I started looking into it.
We can end poverty in the United States. Our nation has the resources to do it.
Think outside of the box.
It's an idea that unites politicians from the left to the right.
A basic federal minimum would be provided.
It's an almost forgotten episode in the history of the United States.
Although it's not politically feasible now, the force of history is on its side. It's going to become political.
We are living through a time and age in which our societies and economies are changing faster than ever.
This hollowing out of the middle class, the pressures that we see on the average American family.
Frankly, part of it's had to do with automation.
Jobs are being displaced.
Even though we're making the same amount of stuff, we're employing fewer people.
And we ain't seen nothing yet.
We need a minimum basic income.
I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Everyone can enjoy a life of luxurious leisure if the machine-produced wealth is shared
spared.
Or we're going to move towards a matrix-like dystopia where humans will all become servants to the owners of the machines.
Insecurities and inequalities are multiplying.
It seems to me the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for the guaranteed income.
The end of slavery, equal rights for men and women, utopias have a tendency of coming true.
Hi, I'm Matt Orfalea, and I've been writing articles and making videos about the big idea of a basic income guarantee for the past few years now.
Guaranteed. Yeah, guaranteed. Basic income, man. Great work on that video, by the way.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Briefly, what got you into that topic?
What sparked my interest in it is when I found out about it is when the Swiss initiative for universal basic income happened. I was like about 2014. I had not heard of it before then, and yeah, it sounded like I needed money. Everyone I know needed money. It sounded like a good idea, but it also sounded crazy. Read a bunch about it, did a bunch of research, and I'm convinced it's a great idea.
Yeah, and who around the table here has heard of this idea?
Oh yeah, the Finns have got a pilot program. I mean, look right now, in America, we have a class of people who produce nothing of value on credit default swaps, you know.
Oh, God.
And they're making, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're producing nothing of any value. And why not do something? They don't put the money back in the economy. They pump it into the Cayman Islands bank accounts.
That's right.
Why not give everybody a guaranteed income? And that will stimulate the economy. It's the most stimulative thing we could possibly do. Instead of bailing out Wall Street when Obama came in, they should have just given every American $35,000 to do whatever they want with. And that would have gotten us out of the rut very quickly,
Yep. I do think it's important that we clarify we're talking about guaranteed income plus. Because there are some conservatives that say, oh great, if we give everyone money, then we don't need things like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. We're not talking about that. We're talking about those social services plus a guaranteed income.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matt?
Well, let me say, I'm definitely for universal healthcare in addition, plus a guaranteed income. But I think a lot of people who are for guaranteed income would say, if you have a guaranteed income, you don't really need a Social Security program because you're guaranteed enough every.
Depends on what you're guaranteed, really.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Now that's a very important part. I mean, I think it would be okay to eliminate a lot of the welfare bureaucracy so long as this figure truly is high enough to keep people out of poverty and it's tied to inflation, so it would go up when necessary.
But these people also pay for those things they're about to lose through sales taxes and payroll taxes. I mean, are you asking people to give up welfare because they get a guaranteed income? Is that what you're asking? Or?
That is a lot of people who are for guaranteed income. Certainly, the libertarian side, that's a big argument that they agree with. And I don't disagree with that. I feel like, there's no need for redundant departments. But what do you guys think?
Well, I think reducing redundancy, like when we're talking about like welfare checks, there's a little bit of redundancy, but I think there's still social programs that are going to be very necessary. It's part of the thing that's lacking, I think, in the talk about reproductive justice is childcare and whether or not you feel like you can choose to keep the baby. So I think, as far as I read, I haven't seen a number that would be high enough that if you were paying a year's worth of childcare, you'd have anything left over for. So I do think we need to prioritize what social services are necessary that on top of the guaranteed income, but something like how the money is distributed, there would be redundancy that could get removed in that sense.
Also, universal health care, the great thing about it is it's just much cheaper to have an entire society have the economy of scale.
Right.
So if you just gave people money and forced them to go to the insurance companies to buy overpriced insurance, in which 30% of which is going to line the pockets of some corporate executive, I think you're wasting the stimulative value of guaranteed income.
Because our health care would just continue to get more expensive.
It would just continue to suck the way it sucks now, and just more.
I think as
as far as, I mean, and I favor, I favor a guaranteed income. I do favor that as well. And I think as far as worrying about, oh, well, what social services might become redundant or unnecessary, I don't even think that should be in the near peripheral of thought, because the bigger problem here is that, we have a shrinking economy as far as what we're producing.
Huge,
B, wages have not kept up with inflation at all.
Yep.
And C, I mean, the wealth disparity in this country is absolutely ridiculous. The average CEO makes 475 times the average worker.
That's
and
crazy.
Adam Smith never foresaw this, by the way. I know you have your little capitalist web dream. He wasn't talking about that when he talked about all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff that people like to cherry pick out of that stuff. But anyway, so really, we already have this ridiculous distribution problem. That's why, as far as healthcare goes, we pay more and get less than every other industrialized world.
Right.
We already have the resources for this stuff.
But
so
America has the best healthcare in the
to.
world. No? What?
Says people that are very isolated.
Well, that depends on where you are in the list of getting your MRI machine.
Yeah.
We've already tried guaranteed poverty. I think we should move on to guaranteed income. Give that a try, maybe. Guaranteed income.
Guaranteed good economy for everyone. That sounds like a good idea to me. Let's start with the very basics here. What is universal basic income?
The very basic explanation is that it's basically there to get people out of poverty, to help people to meet their basic needs. Food, shelter, and clothing. That's it. Opponents of basic income, they try to make a lot of big things out of it. So it's basically there to help us, the people who are living in poverty. So with that, we strongly believe that basic income can definitely eliminate poverty. If one define poverty as those who have a problem financially, cannot afford the basic needs. That's how we define poverty. So in that context, yes, basic income can eliminate poverty.
There's different versions. Try to break that down for us, because so we understand. Because most people are starting to hear about UBI now. Using the acronym Universal Basic Income, but there's different types, right? Can you explain that?
Yeah, there are different types, and then even within these types, it's divided per I have a belief, for universal basic income, this is one I support, where everyone has it, everyone will receive it, regardless, children, from children to all the way to elderly people, they will receive it. Even within that group, there are people who said, okay, we want an UBI Plus. What that means is that we will keep the welfare programs the way it is.
Yes.
So we will put universal basic income in addition to that. I do not support that. I support we should, food stamp, for instance, I believe we should get rid of food stamp. Social Security, I believe we should keep Social Security. But there are some other groups, they believe that we should get rid of Social Security. So it's different. So, it's like when we're talking about universal basic income, everyone have to explain, where they stand on certain aspect of universal basic income.
Well,
so
now
that
that
is
they
very
call
important.
food stamps now, they don't really call them food stamps. They call it WIC or SNAP or
something.
There's different types of programs for different types of people. So what you're saying basically is there's advocacy to not get rid of those, and there's advocacy to get rid of certain programs, and there's advocacy to keep everything and add universal basic income to that.
Yes,
right?
Yes. So it's basically, each person, you have to basically ask them, okay, where do you stand on certain issue?
Now, are they proposing different amounts different monthly amounts, no cap, or no? Like for instance, there's a pilot program in Finland right now that's working pretty well.
Very well.
It seems to me that the only people that, the articles that I've read, right, it's working very well for the entrepreneur types, the unemployed, students looking for work, still in school, whatever. And it seems like the people complaining about it, look to me, they didn't come out and say it exactly, but it looks to me like it's capitalists that are complaining about it.
But when it comes to like experiment and pilots, some people they like judging them pretty hard. It's a pilot.
Yes.
It's give them room. If they're talking about implementation, Right. Then that's where we're like, okay, is it a basic income? Just because they're giving unemployment individual a certain money does not mean that it is basic income. Finland, I think the way they're doing is great, and it is already reducing stress. It's working already, And
yes.
basically, each and every pilot that has been done, an experiment, it has proven to work.
Yes.
It changed people's life for the better.
That's right.
And these the studies, they are there for anyone. They can go and look at them and do their own research, and then they will come up with the same conclusion.
That's right.
And you will find that opponents of universal basic income, they will not go, when they are talking about against basic income, they don't bring up pilots and experiments.
Yes.
They stay away from that, but then when they do that, I question their motive.
Yes.
When they stay away, fail to mention pilots and experiments. And also one thing most people don't know about universal basic income, it was implemented before. It's not just the pilots, it was implemented. And
where at?
It's the city of Medina in Saudi Arabia.
Really?
It's been a long time. We're talking about like
when was that?
Right after the death of Prophet Muhammad, his successor Abu Bakr. He was the first one who implemented universal basic income.
Really?
Yes, we're talking about 632 AD, but he was the first Muslim caliph. Unfortunately, he lasted only 2 years. He passed away, but the program remained. The implementation lasted for about almost 100 years, 80 something years.
Really?
Yes. So the reason why it ended, there were two reasons actually. One, there are some government issues, and then they couldn't find anyone in the city of Medina who needed a basic income.
Really?
So it was truly a city with no poverty. So that's how it ended.
So it was actually a program that maybe lifted anybody that was in poverty, lifted them out of poverty.
Out of poverty.
So then it didn't really serve a purpose anymore. See,
right,
if people would think about that actually accomplishes something on that level, then maybe they would consider it. Thank you for sharing that, because we actually have historical context. Larry, you have your own website called buildthefloor.org. Why do you think that universal basic income is important as a short-term solution, or how?
Well, I think what we're dealing with is a fundamental transformation of our economy. We're dealing with an incredible amount of technology that's being developed, and in a world where a system is designed that could be a benefit for everybody. That technology would allow people to labor less. That technology would be able to do the labor, that people would be able to become more free to go pursue other kinds of work. I think we're actually having a giant conversation over what work is, the definition of work, what we think work is to ourselves and to our community. And the technology that we have today is, instead of a system where that's a benefit, it's at a cost at millions of people's jobs today, and will be tens of millions of jobs in the future. It sounds like, by all major reports, at least a third, if not a greater amount of jobs can or will be automated in the next 10 to 12 years. And so we're talking, at the same time, like you mentioned, 40% of people can't afford a $400 major expense, emergency expense, and 60% of people can't afford a $1,000 expense.
Yes.
So in a world where we have all this technology and we have this much inequality and lack of security for the vast majority of our population, the system has to change. And so I believe fundamentally, having something like a universal basic income creates a new floor of security, which is why I call my site Build the Floor, because it's about creating this new foundation, this new floor for all Americans to be able to build a purpose-driven life with the technology that we are developing collectively and can use collectively, deploying that wealth and prosperity to all Americans, and allowing each American to pursue the kind of work and different kinds of work that will make their life more meaningful. That doesn't mean that all jobs will go away that we consider today, but we expand the definition.
So under my plan, the Freedom Dividend, every American adult would start receiving $1,000 a month, starting at age 18, every month, until the day you die.
So, a lot of people would ask you this question, I'm sure, but people want to know, how's that going to get paid for?
Well, the great thing is our economy is up to a record $20 trillion in GDP, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years. And in terms of how to pay for it, if you look around at the big winners from artificial intelligence and new technologies, it's going to be Amazon, Google, Facebook, Uber. And Amazon literally paid 0 in federal taxes last year.
And Facebook did too, right?
I have to confirm that, but I know Netflix paid 0. Would not surprise me if Facebook paid 0 or close to 0. So you have to ask yourself, is that their fault or our fault? And so when you ask, how do you pay for this universal basic income? If we put in a new tax to start harvesting the gains from all these innovations and new technologies, we can generate hundreds of billions, which combined with the economic activity from putting this money into people's hands, plus cost savings on things like incarceration and homelessness services and emergency room healthcare, plus the value gains from having a stronger, healthier, better educated, mentally healthier, more productive population would be enough to pay for a dividend of $1,000 a month. The way I describe it is that we have to start investing in our people. Companies do this all the time. They expect that they'll win. We have to do the same thing for all citizens.
And a lot of people would wonder about the cost of living, because like in a city like Los Angeles, it's very expensive here. So $1,000 might be okay for Iowa or West Virginia, but what about Los Angeles or Manhattan, for instance?
Well, it's $1,000 a month on top of whatever you're currently making. So it would be a game changer for people in most parts of the country. But it's true that it doesn't go as far in places like Los Angeles as it would in rural communities and places around the country. There's a trade-off involved because many people live in a place like New York because they're trying to access certain economic opportunities. And the hope is that this $1,000 a month, it goes with you wherever you go. So it could help make us much more dynamic, where people feel fixed in place because they need to be close to work, but maybe we could move around a little bit. And it could mean that people from rural communities take a shot at living someplace a little more expensive. I have a feeling a lot of people here in LA might be tempted to move someplace a little lower cost if they had $1,000 a month coming in. So it should fuel movement in both directions.
So a lot of people would also question, when you say value-added tax, they would say, ooh, tax. What is that exactly?
Well, again, if you look around at other countries, they've figured out what we have not. So if you have your biggest tech companies, literally trillion-dollar companies paying 0 in federal taxes, it's partially because the income tax system is really easy to game. A company like Amazon or Netflix will say it just went through Ireland or it didn't happen here in the U.S. So what other countries have already done is they've already implemented a value-added tax, which then means if you're benefiting from that marketplace, you have to pay into it. And that's the most foolproof way to make sure that the American people get a tiny slice of every Amazon purchase, every Google search, every robot truck mile, every Facebook ad, and on and on.
Because, one of our founding fathers, Thomas Paine, was a proponent of the citizens' dividend, is what he called, and he was a radical. He was even considered a radical in his day. And I know a lot of people from all across the political spectrums, and their critique of that is everywhere from, well, we've all heard the free money nonsense. Everybody just wants free money, just like Bernie, free education, And then I've also heard other criticisms as well because, people are concerned that, well, isn't that just like a form of reform? And as much as we all love the New Deal and everything like that, there's people who don't want to see the UBI Plus go away because of, we see how our system functions or dysfunctions. So people would be concerned that already have welfare or disability, hopefully not Social Security would go away, that they're concerned that, well, in the transition of this new system, they might lose all of that, which would concern people. Because we have, as you know, lots of people homeless. More and more people are out in the streets. A lot of people have lost homes since 2008. They've lost careers, income, savings, even pensions, retirement savings. I can certainly relate to that. I know millions of people that way. 40% can't afford basic necessities or a $500 emergency, and it's just going to get worse until we can do something.
So the tricky part to me is that you can find something and you put it in place of the natural resources to tax it, but then the amount of money you're talking about is unclear to people. So I'd much rather just start at the end goal. It's very easy to understand, $1,000 a month for every American adult. And then we can figure out what common resources that we need to harness to get there.
Yeah, and that's true. We can actually. It's great that you're doing this to open up the discussion, and get some movement on it, because I have family in Switzerland, and I first learned about UBI that way from the referendum. Are you familiar with that, from like 2015, 2016?
Yeah, but they were asking for, I believe, something like 36,000 a person per year. But I want to say very clearly, we can do more than just elevate the ideas. We can win the whole thing.
I'm an advocate for worker cooperatives. Allow the workers to be owners. The right of first refusal. To actually buy a company out together as workers. What do you think about that as a long-term solution going forward for our country?
I think worker cooperatives are phenomenal, and the more of that sort of structure we have, the better off we'd be. That's one thing I love about the Freedom Dividend, is that workers having that sort of ownership stake becomes much more realistic in an economy where people all are sharing in the rewards and have some resources to bring to the table. Where the worker subsistence model is just going to get more and more punishing. And so we have to make owners out of everyone of this society. That's one reason why it's called a Freedom Dividend, because that's what owners receive when they own shares of a company. They receive a dividend, and we are the owners and shareholders of this country. We should get a dividend, and that would put more workers in position to become owners of various businesses.
And the more we develop those kinds of businesses like solar and wind and hydropower, it becomes obvious this is the commons that we all we're building this wealth that you were talking about. We all built together. Even if some people are out of work for a while, everybody contributed to this for decades or however long, you know what I mean? So we should be able to get something back, and the wealth should not, this great wealth that's been created should not be going primarily to the top. It's something like 80% now. It's ridiculous. So we have to start taking those measures to go in that direction and make sure that I think the system needs to reorganize the structure so that wealth is distributed differently in the first place. Yes. Don't you agree?
And the most effective way to do that is through something like universal basic income, to build what I call the trickle-up economy, from people and families and communities up. And there are, frankly, relatively few paths to try and build that economy. And in my opinion, everyone's going to understand very quickly that the fastest, most direct, and successful path there is going to involve just putting money into people's hands. It's like a lot of other politicians are trying to backtrack into it in various ways. It's like, we're going to try and make this free, we're going to try and make that free. But the best way to make us all owners and beneficiaries is to put money in our hands.
Exactly, and we'll contribute to the economy. And
the money's just going to get circulated over and over again through the economy. And we're all going to win for it. Even if you go to a room full of CEOs, which I have spoken to, and they know that their businesses do better in an economy where people have money to spend.
And we'll be able to help people that actually are in need, like the people in depression, people that are on addicted to opiates, and also too, I'm an advocate for encouraging people to be productive. And to be honest with you, I think most people actually want to be productive, don't you?
Yeah, of course. And that's one of the things that studies have shown with universal basic income, is that work levels stay essentially the same. The only two groups that work less are new moms who spend more time with their kids and teenagers who graduate from high school at higher levels. So I don't think anyone's going to get mad at that. So I agree. If we have better measurements for our economy, we can start solving the real problems of this age instead of this phantom GDP number, stock market price growth that only advantages really the top fifth of the population, and this phantom headline unemployment number, which is completely not indicative of where we are as a society right now. And there's labor force participation, which right now is at 63%, which is near a multi-decade low, in the same levels as Ecuador and Costa Rica. So, there are all these pain points that we all see and feel in the economy, and then we're cheerleading these phantom numbers that paint a rosier picture that we all know rings false.
Thank you so much, Andrew. This is Niswander with Andrew Yang on the Nowman Show.
Down the street who doesn't have the money for new shoes on his feet.